the bus hit a road bump. I was jolted up from my sleep. It was so dark outside the window. All I could see was outlines of cubic buildings, so charmless, rows and rows of them. And then following the buildings, rows and rows of petrol stations. And I said to myself, oh my God, where am I? I don't want to be here. But funnily enough, just 2 days before this, I was so looking forward to waking up in a bus, in the morning, in an unknown town. This was my first time traveling solo. And yet, as the bus that I was in pulled into a petrol station, and the driver shouted, Rockhampton, Queensland, I said to myself, this just isn't happening. This is my stop, but I don't want to go down. But I did go down, because I had to go. My seat was reserved. So I went to the Greyhound station where there was a locker counter, and I gave this heavy-set woman all my luggages. And I asked her, excuse me, miss, what's good over here? And she just looked at me with this puzzled look. To eat? And I was like, well, to eat, to see, to do? Darling, she said, with this smile that was half mocking and half pitying. Darling, there ain't nothing good in Rockhampton. Oh my God. So I walked into the city, and my first impression just confirmed this. It seemed like a very dangerous place, really. Someone might actually shoot you, or stab you, or both, and no one would notice. Anyone here from Queensland? Good. So basically, I've heard about Queensland and Queenslanders. Apparently, they're a bit loony. In travel books, this person was reliably informed that Queenslanders are, I quote, madder than cut snakes. Madder than cut snakes. But I wanted to give Queenslanders the benefit of the doubt. So a cafe opened, and I felt a little hungry. There was a very fat man sitting at this outdoor seating area. He had large bushy beard and long hair, and he had a hat on. And he had a Santa Claus face, very fat, very red, and I smiled at him. And he looked at me and he growled, what the fornication are you looking at? And I was like, Queenslanders, madder than cut snakes. But I ordered my breakfast. It was a French toast. It was definitely the prettiest French toast that I've ever seen. Unfortunately, I had to have it in Rockhampton, Queensland. And I was having my French toast. I said to myself, this is going to be one hell of a long day. After my breakfast, I walked again. I just wandered around. There was nothing good in this place. I walked across bridges across rivers with brown water, across parks with muddy ground and dirty seats. Thankfully, I ended up at a tourist information center. I walked in, and it was a very warm place. And it was run by a couple, an elderly couple. The woman reminded me of Tweety Bird for some reason. So she looked at me, she's like, hello, darling, can I help you? And I said to her, oh, I am lost. And I won't forget this because she looked at me with big blue eyes, and she pointed right at me, and she said, there isn't a better place to be lost than Rockhampton. Apparently, she and her husband came from Sydney to Rockhampton because of the weather. And so I asked them, where should I go? They said, take the E50 bus due east. I did. What they didn't tell me was the E50 bus was only going to run 3 times a day. And when I got to the bus stop, I just missed it by 10 seconds. I was in agony. I was in anguish. Yet, as I was so down, a bus pulled in front of me. The door opened. It was empty. The driver said to me, hop in. I had just finished my round. We can still catch up with that E50 bus. He took out his walkie-talkie, and he radioed the driver. And he said, there's a passenger waiting for you in the next bus stop. Just wait there. 3 minutes later, I was on the E50 bus. And I profusely thanked the kindly driver. And I just had this feeling that someone had just saved my life. So at the east end of Rockhampton, New York, was a tourist attraction, which was actually a reconstructed village. They took out all these authentic houses and churches from centuries old, and they reconstructed them here in this mock environment that resembled a village surrounding a village living area. So it was fine. I just loved the atmosphere, the serenity of the place. There were churches, school buildings, farms. I couldn't get enough of it. As I was walking around, I heard a honk, wink, wink, and I looked around. There is one of those really black Victorian-era cars, very big, and a guy was on it. And he looked at me, and he's like, "Good day, mate. Want to go for a ride?" And I was like, "Sure," I hopped on. And he said, "Well, I am a volunteer in this place. Where are you from? Indonesia? Never heard of that place. Do you know Philippines? My girlfriend's in the Philippines. What are you doing in Rockhampton?" I said to him, "Well, for the weather, of course." "Ah, there's no better place to enjoy Rockhampton weather than the Capricorn coast." "Where is that?" "The bus will wait for you in 1 hour outside of this place. I will call them and let them know to expect you." And so he dropped me off. And I just saw him drive away in this antique car. 1 hour later, I walked out of that place. And that man, his name was Drew. I saw him in a communal lunch, having lunch with all the volunteers. And he shouted my name from a distance. And he said, "Goodbye." And I walked out into my bus. Well, Drew didn't tell me, again, that Capricorn Coast was actually an hour out of Rockhampton. But it was 1 hour worth journeying. What was on Capricorn Coast? It's a stretch of sandy beach, just going far, so far as your eyes can see. It is at the eastern tip of Australia. I loved it. I walked, and I walked. The weather was fine. It was cool, and it was warm. I walked for 5 hours, and I would have walked for 5 hours more. It's just that the sun was setting, and I had to go back to Rockhampton to catch my Greyhound. So I went to Rockhampton, and I got back to the Greyhound station, and I got my luggage back, and the heavy-set woman was still there. And she's like, "Darling, what did you do today?" I said to her, "Well, I just got lost." Before I got onto the Greyhound to go on the next leg of my trip, it just felt to me so ironic that I woke up that morning feeling that this town has nothing to offer, when I realized it had a million tiny precious things to offer. From French toast to irate cafe patrons, from Tweety Bird and her husband, from reconstructed villages to antique cars, to tattooed volunteers and his Filipino girlfriend, to a stretch of white sandy beach and a dog walking on it. And I knew maybe that I probably will never come back to Rockhampton, Queensland. But I'm glad that I got lost there, because there I found myself. And that's much.
Chris just gave us a really interesting story.